Do you ever feel like someone is watching you at night? Even when you know you are alone, do you sometimes get that cold, strange feeling? Tonight, I am going to tell you 3 true stories that happened on summer nights. These stories are not made up. They happen to real people. And after you hear them, you might never feel safe on a summer night again. So, turn off your lights, get comfortable, and listen closely. If you hear a sound outside, do not look, just listen. Because these stories will make your heart race from the very first second. Story 1. The lake house visitor Emily was just 19 when she and her friends decided to rent a small house by a quiet lake. The house was old, with paint peeling off the walls and a porch that made a loud creak every time someone stepped on it. The lake was dark and still, and tall trees stood all around, making the place feel hidden from the world. The only way to get there was a long, bumpy dirt road that twisted through the woods. It felt like they were in their own secret world. On the first day, everything was perfect. Emily and her friends swam in the cool water, played music, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. They grilled burgers on the porch and watched the sun go down over the lake. At night, they sat by a fire, telling ghost stories and daring each other to swim in the dark water. The air was warm and the sky was full of stars. Emily felt happy and safe, surrounded by her best friends. But on the second night, everything changed. Emily noticed it first. The crickets and frogs that made noise every night suddenly went quiet. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. Emily felt a chill run down her back. She looked at her friends, but they were still laughing and talking. She tried to ignore the feeling, but it got stronger. The fire seemed smaller. The woods looked darker. She felt like something was watching them from the trees. Emily tried to join in the fun, but she kept glancing at the woods. Every time she looked, she thought she saw something move between the trees. She told herself it was just her imagination. But then, she heard it. A slow, steady crunching sound. It sounded like footsteps on dry leaves. At first, she thought it was just an animal. But the steps were too heavy, too slow, and they did not stop. "Did you guys hear that?" Emily whispered, her voice shaking a little. Her friend Jake, who always acted brave, grabbed a flashlight and pointed it at the trees. The light cut through the darkness, but there was nothing there, just shadows and old trees. "It's probably just a deer," Jake said, trying to sound calm. But Emily could see his hand shaking, but the footsteps kept coming. Closer and closer. The sound was slow, but steady. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Suddenly the footsteps stopped. Everyone sat frozen, listening. The silence was so deep, Emily could hear her own heartbeat. She felt her skin prickle with fear. Then, from the darkness, a voice, low, rough, and close. "Let me in." Emily felt cold all over. She looked at her friends. Their faces were pale, eyes wide with fear. "Who's there?" Jake called out, but his voice was not as strong as before. No answer. Just the sound of breathing, heavy, rough breathing, coming from the darkness. The group huddled closer together. Sarah, Emily's best friend, grabbed her hand. "Let's go inside," Sarah whispered. But before they could move, the footsteps started again. This time, they were running, fast, straight toward the group. Emily screamed. Everyone jumped up, grabbing their things and running for the house. They slammed the door shut and locked it. Inside, they huddled together, listening. The footsteps circled the house, slow and steady. Then, a scratching sound at the door, like long, sharp nails dragging across the wood. "Let me in," the voice whispered again, closer this time. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She could see the doorknob turning, slowly, back and forth. The old metal creaked, but the lock held. They called the police, but the nearest station was over 30 minutes away. All they could do was wait. For what felt like hours, the footsteps circled the house. The voice whispered at every window, every door. "Let me in." Emily's friend Sarah started to cry. Jake tried to comfort her, but his hands were shaking. Emily sat with her back against the door, staring at the lock, hoping it would hold. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. The footsteps faded away. The group sat in silence, too scared to move. Every little sound made them jump. The wind rattled the windows. The old house creaked. But the voice did not come back. When the police finally arrived, the woods were empty. The officers searched the area but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of anyone. But on the front door, deep in the wood, were 5 long scratches, as if someone or something had tried to claw its way inside. Emily and her friends left the lake house that night. They never went back. To this day, Emily says she can still hear that voice in her nightmares. "Let me in. Would you have opened the door?" But Emily's story did not end there. For weeks after that night, she could not sleep well. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the dark woods, the empty lake, and the scratches on the door. She started to hear things at night. Soft footsteps outside her window, a whisper in the darkness. She told herself it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. One night, a few weeks later, Emily was home alone. Her parents were out of town, and her little brother was at a friend's house. She was lying in bed, trying to read when she heard it, a soft, slow scratching at her bedroom window. She froze. The sound was faint, but steady. Scratch, scratch, scratch. She wanted to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. She pulled the covers over her head and waited, her heart pounding. The scratching stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a whisper. So soft, she almost didn't hear it. "Let me in." Emily never slept with her window open again. Even now, years later, she checks her windows and doors every night before she goes to bed. She never forgot that voice. And she never will. Story 2. The Campfire. Shadow Chris loved camping. He always felt safe in the woods. He liked the sound of the river, the smell of the trees, and the way the stars looked so bright at night. He had camped many times before, but this trip was different. This trip was the one he would never forget. It was July, and Chris wanted to spend a weekend alone in the forest. He packed his tent, his sleeping bag, and some food. He drove far from the city, down a long road that turned into a dirt path. He found a quiet spot by a river, set up his tent, and made a small campfire. The first night was peaceful. The stars were bright, and the only sounds were the river and the wind in the trees. Chris sat by the fire, roasting marshmallows and listening to the water. He felt calm and happy. The next day, Chris explored the woods. He walked along the river, watched birds, and took pictures of the trees. He saw a deer drinking from the water, and even found a small waterfall. He felt free and alive. When the sun started to set, he went back to his camp. He made dinner and sat by the fire again, reading a book. The night was warm, and the fire made him feel safe. But as the night grew darker, Chris started to feel uneasy. The woods seemed quieter than before. The wind stopped, and even the river sounded softer. Chris tried to focus on his book, but he kept looking up, feeling like something was out there. He told himself it was just his imagination. Then, he heard a branch snap in the darkness. It was a sharp, clear sound, like someone stepping on a stick. Chris looked up, shining his flashlight into the trees. He saw nothing, just shadows. He listened, but the woods were silent again. He shrugged it off. thinking it was just an animal. But then he heard it again, closer this time. Snap. Chris stood up, his heart beating faster. He called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" There was no answer, just the sound of the river. He waited, holding his breath, but nothing happened. He sat back down, but he could not shake the feeling that something was out there, watching him. He tried to read his book, but he kept hearing small sounds. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling, something moving in the dark. He looked at the fire, wishing it was bigger. He added more wood, but the flames only made the shadows dance around him. He felt alone and small. Chris decided to go to bed early, hoping sleep would come quickly. He zipped himself into his tent, but he could not relax. Every sound outside made him jump. He listened to the river, trying to calm down, but the feeling of being watched would not go away. Hours passed. Chris drifted in and out of sleep, waking at every noise. Then, just after midnight, he heard it. A soft, whispering voice, right outside his tent. "Come out and play." Chris froze. He held his breath, listening. The voice was quiet but clear. It sounded like a person, but also not like a person at all. The voice came again, closer this time. "Come out and play." Chris could see a shadow moving outside his tent, circling, getting closer. He grabbed his flashlight and unzipped. The tent just a little, peeking out. What he saw made his blood run cold. Standing by the fire was a figure. Tall, thin, with long tangled hair and eyes that glowed in the firelight. Its mouth was twisted into a wide, unnatural smile. The figure raised a hand, beckoning Chris to come closer. "Come out and play." Chris zipped the tent shut, his hands shaking. He grabbed his phone, but there was no signal. He tried to stay quiet, hoping the figure would go away. But the figure did not leave. It circled the tent, whispering, laughing, scratching at the fabric. Chris could hear the sound of nails dragging across the tent, slow and steady. He stayed awake all night, clutching his flashlight, praying for morning. The hours felt endless. Chris listened to the figure moving around his tent, sometimes stopping, sometimes laughing in a low, strange voice. He wanted to scream, but he was too scared. He thought about running, but he was too afraid to unzip the tent. He just waited, hoping the sun would rise soon. When the first light of morning finally came, the figure was gone. Chris waited a long time before he dared to open the tent. When he finally stepped outside, the fire was out, and the woods were quiet again. But around his tent, in the dirt, were footprints. Bare, human footprints, circling again and again. Chris packed up and left that morning. He never camped alone again. But Chris's story did not end there. For weeks after that night, he felt like he was being followed. He would see shadows moving in the corner of his eye, hear footsteps behind him when he walked home at night. He tried to tell himself it was just his imagination, but the feeling never went away. One night, Chris was walking home from work. It was late, and the streets were empty. He heard footsteps behind him, slow and steady. He turned, but there was no one there. He started to walk faster, but the footsteps kept pace. He broke into a run, his heart pounding. When he finally reached his apartment, he slammed the door shut and locked it. That night, as he lay in bed, he heard a soft whisper outside his window. "Come out and play." Chris moved to a new city a few months later. He never went camping, alone again. Even now, he checks his windows and doors every night. He never forgot that voice, and he never will. Would you have unzipped the tent? Would you have looked outside? Or would you have stayed hidden, hoping the morning would come? Story 3. The Summer Night Stalker. Alex lived in a small, quiet town. Nothing much ever happened there. The streets were lined with old houses, and everyone knew each other. But one summer, something happened to Alex that he would never forget. It was a hot, sticky night in August. The air felt heavy, and the sky was dark, with no moon. Alex was walking home from his friend's house. He took a shortcut through a quiet neighborhood. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the soft hum of streetlights and the distant bark of a dog. Alex walked slowly, feeling tired but happy after a fun night with friends. As he walked, Alex started to feel strange. It was a feeling he could not explain. It was like someone was watching him. He looked over his shoulder but saw nothing. Just empty streets and dark houses. He tried to ignore the feeling, but it would not go away. He walked a little faster, telling himself he was just being silly. Then, he heard footsteps behind him. Slow, steady footsteps, matching his own. Alex turned quickly, but there was no one there. He stopped and listened. The footsteps stopped, too. He started walking again, and the footsteps started again. This time, they sounded closer. Alex's heart began to beat faster. He tried to tell himself it was just his imagination, but the fear was real. He started to walk even faster, almost running now. The footsteps behind him grew louder, faster, chasing him. Alex turned a corner, hoping to lose whoever, or whatever, was following him. He ducked into a narrow alley, pressing himself against the wall, trying to catch his breath. He listened, but the footsteps had stopped. For a moment, everything was quiet. That's when he saw it. At the end of the alley, under a broken streetlight, stood a figure. The figure was tall and thin, dressed in black. Its face was hidden in shadow, but Alex could feel its eyes on him. The figure did not move. It just stood there, watching. Alex felt frozen. He wanted to run, but his legs would not move. The figure started walking toward him, slow and steady. Each step echoed in the empty alley. Alex's fear took over. He turned and ran, bursting out of the alley and back onto the street. He could hear the footsteps behind him, getting closer and closer. He ran as fast as he could, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached his house, fumbling with his keys, desperate to get inside. His hands were shaking so much he almost dropped the keys. He finally got the door open, slammed it shut, and locked it tight. He pressed his back against the door, breathing hard. But the footsteps did not stop. They circled the house, slow and steady. Alex could hear them moving from the front door to the windows, then to the back door, then back again. Alex called the police, his voice shaking. He told them someone was outside his house, but when the police arrived, the figure was gone. The officers looked around but found nothing. No footprints, no sign of anyone. They told Alex it was probably just a prank, but Alex knew it was not a prank. He knew what he saw, but that was not the end. For weeks after that night, Alex saw the figure everywhere he went. Sometimes he would see it standing across the street, just watching him. Sometimes he would see it in the reflection of a shop window, standing behind him. Sometimes he would see it at the edge of the park, half hidden by the trees. The figure never came close, but it was always there, always watching. Alex started to avoid going out at night. He kept his curtains closed and his doors locked. He told his friends, but they did not believe him. They said he was just tired or stressed. But Alex knew the truth. He knew the figure was real. One night, Alex woke up to a soft tapping at his window. Tap, tap, tap. He looked out, but saw nothing. The next morning, he found footprints in the dirt outside his window. Bare, human footprints, leading away into the darkness. Alex felt a cold fear settle in his chest. He knew the figure had been there, watching him while he slept. Alex moved, away at the end of the summer, hoping to escape. He found a new apartment in a busy city, far from his old town. For a while, he felt safe. But sometimes, late at night, he still hears those footsteps outside his window. Slow, steady, waiting. Sometimes he thinks he sees a shadow standing across the street, just watching. He never forgot that summer, and he never will. Would you have looked back? Would you have run? Or would you have tried to face the figure in the alley? Sometimes the scariest things are the ones we cannot explain. Thank you for listening to these true scary stories. If you enjoyed them, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your own scary stories in the comments below. I read every comment, and I love hearing your experiences. Maybe your story will be the next one I share. And remember, sometimes the scariest things are not in our imagination. Sometimes they are real. Good night, and sleep, if you can.